2 weeks we have been discussing a topic which are interconnected actually. So last 3 sessions I think we should quickly recollect. Anybody remembers what we discussed the last week?
October 20th.
Tuesday.
So last week we had that
Hari
special class on japa meditation by
Yes, Kripame Prabhu. Kumangalam.
yeah Kripamaya
Yes,
Prabhuji.
yes,
Before that we had discussed on false ego.
yes. Right. So, uh, so I'll just try to recap. Uh, so basically, all these slokas which we are discussing from Bhagavad Gita, they are actually from the third chapter. Okay, so we can see that we are discussing. So basically, we started from here. Okay, so basically, no, we started from here actually. So which are the seating places of lust? Right, we started from there. So Krishna, Arjuna asked actually, no, by what one is impelled to sinful activities, even unwillingly, as if engaged by force. So this was a question Arjuna had asked, and Krishna actually replied that it is lust only, Arjuna, which was born in contact with material mode of passion and later transformed into wrath, and which is all devouring. So basically, after that, actually, we discussed mainly which are the sitting places of lust, right? So that was this sloka. So we started from here. We discussed the senses, the mind, and intelligence are the sitting places of lust. Through them, lust covers the real knowledge of the living entity. Okay, so the primary reason for committing sinful activity in the material world of the living entity is actually lust. So lust actually we understood that lust means a desire to enjoy independent of the Lord, right? Basically, love and lust is distinguished as love means a desire to satisfy the supreme Lord, who is actually a source of everything, right? He is the source of benefactor of everything. What is the shloka? Uh, Bhoktaram Yadna Tapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram. So Krishna is the proprietor of all the material and spiritual world, and he is source of everything, and everything comes from him. All living entities are his part and parcel, right? So when the living entities are serving the Lord and trying to please the Supreme Lord, then actually it is called love. Otherwise, when the living entity try to enjoy themselves, without keeping Lord in the picture, then actually it is lust. So this desire actually is the cause, primary cause for the living entity to commit sinful activities. And the seating places of lust is described as mind, senses, mind, and intelligence. So that is one session we had. Then the next session we discussed actually um, about actually mind, intelligence, and ego, right? So that is a topic we discussed. Mainly we discussed about false ego in the previous session, right? Now in today's session we are going to discuss about like this. It's a continuation of the same topic. We're going to discuss about mind, intelligence, soul, right? So what is the connection between them? Just yeah. Okay, so we'll start today's session. So we can start with the shloka. Anybody wants to read the shloka? Yeah, we'll read together. I'll read and you can repeat. Indriyani paranyahur
Indriyani Paranyahur
indriyebhya param mana
इन्द्रियेभ्यः
Indriyebhya
परं मनः
Paramanaha
manastu para buddhir
Manasastu
मनसस्तु
Parabuddhir
yo buddhe paradastuta sa
Yo
यो
Buddhe
बुद्धेः
Paratastaha
indriyani paranyahur
Indriyani
इन्द्रियाणि
Paranyahur
परण्याहुः
indriyebhya param mana
Indriyebhya
इन्द्रियेभ्यः परं मनः
Paramanaha
manastu para buddhir
Manastu
मनसस्तु बुद्धिर्
Parabuddhir
yo buddhe paradastusa
Yo
यो
Buddhe
बुद्धेः
Paratastaha
परतस्तुतः
Indriyani paranyahur
Indriyani
इन्द्रियाणि
Paranyahur
परण्याहुः
indriyebhya param mana
Indriyebhya
इन्द्रियेभ्यः परं मनः
Paramanaha
manastu para buddhir
Manastu
मनस्तु
Parabuddhir
परा बुद्धिर्
yo buddhe paradastusa.
Yo
यो
Buddhe
बुद्धेः
Paratastaha
परतस्तु स
Okay, so somebody can read translation. And purport.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Shall I read the translation?
Yes, Mataji.
Translation. The working senses are superior to dull matter. Mind is higher than the senses. Intelligent is still higher than the mind. And he, the soul, is even higher than the intelligence. Should I continue or I'll
You can continue, Mataji.
purport? The senses are different outlets for the activities of lust. Lust is reserved within the body, but it is given vent through the senses. Therefore, the senses are superior to the body as a whole. These outlets are not in use when there is superior consciousness or Krishna consciousness. In Krishna consciousness, the soul makes direct connection with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, the hierarchy of bodily functions, as described here, ultimately ends in the Supreme Soul. Bodily action means the function of the senses, and stopping the senses means stopping the bodily action. But since the mind is active, then even though the body may be silent and at rest, the mind will act as it does during dreaming. But above the mind is the determination of the intelligence, and above the intelligence is the soul proper. If, therefore, the soul is directly engaged with the Supreme, naturally all other subordinates, namely the intelligence, mind, and senses, will be automatically engaged. In the Katha Upanishad, there is similar passage in which it is said that the objects of sense gratification are superior to the senses, and mind is superior to the sense objects. If, therefore, the mind is directly engaged in the service of the Lord constantly, then there is no chance that the sense will become engaged in other ways. This mental attitude has already been explained. Param Drishtva Nivartate. If the mind is engaged in the transcendental service of the Lord, there is no chance of it being engaged in the lower propensities. In the Katha Upanishad, the soul has been described as Mahan, the great. Therefore, the soul is above all, namely the sense objects, the senses, the mind, and the intelligence. Therefore, directly understanding the constitutional position of the soul is the solution of the whole problem. Prabhuji,
You can
should I
check anybody.
continue?
Any devotee wants to continue the next paragraph?
Yeah, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
I can read, Prabhuji.
Yes, Mataji. Sure.
With intelligence, one has to seek out the constitutional position of the soul and then engage the mind always in the Krishna consciousness. That solves the whole problem. A neophyte, a, neo, a neophyte spiritualist is generally advised to keep aloof from the object of senses. The screen is just, can you bring it down, Prabhuji, if you don't mind? Able to see. Yeah.
You can
The,
read.
that solve the problem. A
No,
neophyte
no.
spiritualist. Yeah.
You have to read from here, Mataji. But aside from that,
Okay.
you can
Okay.
here you can see
But
the this.
aside from that, one
Yeah.
has to strengthen the mind by use of intelligence. If by the intelligence one engage one's mind in Krishna consciousness by complete surrender onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then automatically the mind becomes stronger. And even though the senses are very strong, like serpents, they will be no more effective than serpents with broken fangs. But even though the soul is the master of intelligence and mind, and the senses also, still, unless it is strengthened by the association with Krishna in Krishna consciousness, there is every chance of falling down due to agitated mind. Evam buddhi param buddha buddha swam abhidhyatmanam. Huh?
I think we can read,
Can you
Mataji.
repeat?
We'll
Yeah,
read
yes.
together the shloka. Yeah, just 1 second. Just have to mute. Okay. So we will go to here. Yeah. So next shloka. You can read together. All of us can repeat. Evam buddhe param buddhva
एवं
एवं
बुद्धे
बुद्धे
परं
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 बुद्ध्वा
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 संस्तभ्यात्मानमात्मना
संस्तभ्यात्मानम्
संस्थात्मानमात्मना
आत्मनः
जाहि शत्रुं महाबाहो
जाहि
जाहि
शत्रुं
शत्रुं
महाबाहो
बाहो
कामरूपं दुराशदम्
कामरूपं दुराशदम्
दुरासदम्
एवं बुद्धे परं बुद्ध्वा
एवं
एवं
बुद्धे
बुद्धे
परं
परं
बुद्ध्वा
बुद्ध्वा
संस्तभ्यात्मानमात्मना
संस्तभ्यात्मानम्
आत्मनम्
आत्मनः
जाहि शत्रु महाबाहो
जाहि
जाहि
शत्रुं
शत्रुं
महाबाहो
कामरूपं दुराशदम्
कामरूपं
कामरूपं
दुराशदम्
दुरासदम्
एवं बुद्धे परं बुद्ध्वा
एवं बुद्धे
एवं बुद्धे
परं
परं
बुद्ध्वा
बुद्ध्वा
संस्तभ्यात्मानमात्मना
संस्तभ्यात्मानम् आत्मना
जाहि शत्रु महाबाहो
जाहि
जाहि
शत्रुं
शत्रुं
महाबाहो
कामरूपं दुराशतम्
कामरूपं
कामरूपं
दुराशतम्.
दुरासदम्
Okay, Mother, you can continue translation and purport.
Yeah, translation. Thus, knowing oneself to the transcendental to the material senses, mind and intelligence, O mighty armed Arjuna, one should steady the mind by deliberate spiritual intelligence, Krishna consciousness, and thus, by spiritual strength, conquer this instable enemy known as lust. Purport.
Insatiable.
Insatiable enemy known as lust. Purport. The third chapter of Bhagavad Gita is consecutively directive to Krishna consciousness by knowing oneself as the eternal serviator of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Without considering impersonal guidance, the ultimate end in the material existence of life, one is certainly influenced by propensities for lust and desire for dominating the resources of material nature. Desire for overloading and for sense gratification is the greatest enemy of the conditioned soul. But by the strength of Krishna consciousness, one can control the material senses, the mind, and the intelligence. One may not give up work and prescribed duties all of a sudden, but gradually developing Krishna consciousness, one can be situated in transcendental position without being influenced by the material senses and the mind. By steady intelligence directed towards one's pure identity, this is sum total of this chapter. This is the sum total of this chapter. In the immature stage of material existence, philosophical speculations and artificial attempts to control the senses by the so-called practice of yogic postures can can never help a man towards spiritual life. He must be trained in Krishna consciousness by higher intelligence. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji. Yeah. So these topics which we are discussing, I think, are very important topics. No, to understand what is the root of the problems, right, in the material existence, and it is giving Lord is giving specific information how actually to identify and how to control or how to curtail these tendencies. So from that perspective, it is very very important. Okay. So now we'll see what is discussed. Yeah. So this first translation part, anybody can explain what is mentioned. It's very straightforward. Shloka translation. Anybody wants to explain that?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Yes, Mataji.
I will leave in some time. I'll just try if I'm putting it right, Prabhuji. It is mentioned that the other senses, all the senses which we have got, are inferior when compared to mind, and mind, intelligence is comparatively higher. But For all these senses, mind, and intelligent, our soul is higher than all these things.
Mm. Yes, Mataji. Exactly.
If that is what translation is put across, Prabhuji.
Yes, yes. So I think this everybody understand this part.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, thank you, Mataji. So this is the hierarchy, right? So we remember the picture, no? Like there's analogy. What is that picture? Yes. So this example, I think we are continuing. The example of the chariot. Okay. So we can understand. See what is being told actually is that the dull matter. So the matter actually, right? So the dull compared to the dull matter, the senses are superior, right? And compared to the senses, more superior is the mind, and compared to the mind, more superior is intelligence, and compared to intelligence, the most superior is the soul. So in this analogy, we have actually we have, I will repeat analogy, or anybody I would like anybody somebody to tell the analogy because I have told many times. Any devotee want to remember? Try to remember the analogy, like what represents in this chariot each part. Is the image visible?
Yes, yes, Prabhuji.
Definitely.
Like horses are the senses,
Mm.
rope is the intelligence, and that person,
No,
yeah,
rope is
sorry,
not intelligent.
Mind, mind.
mind.
Rope
Yes.
is mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rope is mind, and the person who is holding that is the intelligence,
Yes.
and the person sitting is the soul,
Mm.
and the charioteer is the body.
Chariot is the body. Yes.
Okay, Prabhuji.
Correct. Very nice. So, so from this in this analogy, we can understand, no, like what is more. So basically, from the control perspective, what is superior actually? So the horses, right? The horses are there. How is the horse controlled? Through the
Mind.
reins, through
Yeah,
the
rope.
through the ropes, right? So the rope actually, from the control perspective, rope actually has more control. Rope can control the horses. So that way, the rope is superior. Okay, but the rope doesn't act by itself. No? Then who is controlling the rope? Is the driver, right? And what is the driver? Driver is intelligence. So intelligence through the medium of mind controls the senses. So that way, intelligence is superior to mind. And but ultimately, everything makes sense only because of the traveler, right? Ultimately, you can consider this as a kind of a taxi, right? Somebody's hired a taxi or somebody's hired a vehicle and he's traveling. So who is important actually is the traveler. If the travel is not there, then other things doesn't make sense. So for the soul, for the purpose of the soul, the rest of things are existing. Okay, the body and all the other. No. So basically, we have the gross body and subtle body, right? So this is basically gross body and subtle body. So this mind, intelligence, and false ego, right? They actually is the subtle body, and gross body is the actual body we can perceive with our senses, which is consisting of the five elements, right? The Panchabhutas: earth, water, air, fire, ether. So we have seen many times the living entity. So the most important person is the traveler, the soul. So he is the most important actually. So this is the analogy here, right? It's a very important and profound analogy it is. So and then also we discussed that no living entity, the soul, sometimes take a body of a human being, sometimes it takes a body of an animal, sometimes it takes a body of a plant, so anything actually. There are 84 lakh species, and it keeps taking different bodies based on his karma, his desire. So based on that, different. So material nature gives a body which is suitable for the living entity to fulfill his desire. So every life, there's a set of karma which is taken. So basically, there's a something called sanchita karma, which is all the karma that is acquired over many lifetimes. And from that sanchita karma, one set of karma is taken, and it is given for this particular life. This is known as the prarabdha karma, right? And then this, and according to prarabdha karma, the living entity gets a body to fulfill those desires which are there in those karma. And after that, again, it takes another body. So in general, the soul actually kind of is a helpless traveler. No, because I mean, as long as the soul is actually doesn't have the spiritual intelligence, as long as the soul is not surrendered to the Supreme Lord, or he doesn't is not practicing devotional service, the soul is a helpless traveler. He doesn't have any control of, basically things will work automatically. Basically, the driver, will the intelligence actually, intelligence is materially oriented. The intelligence will drive these sensors into a direction which actually makes the living entity more and more entangled in the material life, right? So and the rest of the rest of the apparatus automatically works, right? Intelligence will using the mind. Actually, it will divert, or it will try to control the senses in different direction. But if the intelligence is influenced by the material nature, or no, or the intelligence is not spiritual, then the activity of the intelligence and mind, everything, will take the living entity more and more away from the ultimate goal. But so the soul actually is helpless, because of each life he has got so much karma, and the soul actually is just witnessing, and many times the soul doesn't know anything what is happening, right? Because we are actually we'll try to, somebody tries to understand the spiritual knowledge by Vedic scriptures, then we get a picture of this. But otherwise, actually, living entity doesn't, generally most of the people doesn't think about anything, right? They just live according to their impetus, or whatever their instincts, what are they, they just, people are just caught up in this web of Maya, and then they don't know what's happening in the life. No, they just fall victim to the different desires and things like that. So that is what the importance of the free will is coming, right? So that is what, very importantly, the scripture says that the living entity, the soul, is having a free will. It has two choices actually. Either it can serve the Maya, or it can serve the Supreme Lord. So all the majority of the people in the material world, they are all serving the Maya. And when you serve the Maya, or when you are bereft of the spiritual knowledge, then this living entity cannot influence anything. The life just goes based on the karma. The living entity actually just enjoys and suffer, and then the chariot is moving out of his control. He cannot influence anything. Everything works automatically. That's what the shloka is there. No, prakriti kriyamanani gune karmani sarvasha ahangara vimudatma karta aham iti manyate. So what it's saying, prakriti kriyamanani gune karmani sarvasha. So prakriti kriyamani means the material nature by means of guna, the three gunas, sattva raja tamo, right? Prakriti kriyamanani gune karmani sarvasha ahangara vimudatma karta aham iti manyate. The living entity thinks that he is the doer actually, but actually the material nature is acting through the modes, and forcing the living entity to act in various ways based on whatever is karma, right? So that is actually the real fact. So in this such a scenario, the bewildered living entity is just an helpless passenger, without much control on where the vehicle is going. He is not able to do anything. Like, he is not able to influence the intelligence, etc. But as we saw many times, the along with the living entity, the super soul, the Paramatma, is also there. When every life, the Paramatma, so from the point the living entity comes from the spiritual world to the point it returns to the spiritual world. The Paramatma never leaves the living entity. It's always situated in the living entity's heart. We have seen that. Sarvasya jaham hridi sannivishto matta smriti jnanam abohanam cha. Sarvasya jaham hridi sannivishto, right? And then Ishvara sarva bhudanam hrideshe arjuna tishtati. Brahmayan sarva bhutani andra rudani maya. So the Paramatma is there in the heart of the living entity. And the living entity, we have seen the example of two birds in the tree, right? The living entity is not at all bothered, or is not even aware of that Paramatma is there, because of he's so much entangled into the material affairs. But sometime, when the living entity becomes frustrated, or no, due to the grace of a pure devotee or another enlightened person, the living entity actually gets the knowledge about the super soul. And as soon as the living entity is paying attention to super soul, and it desires he has a desire to get out of the cycle of birth and death, then actually, then the living entity his intelligence becomes spiritualized, and then the living entity can have control on the particular apparatus and thing. Otherwise, actually, we are helplessly, living entities are just being a witness, but without able to do much influence in the moment of this chariot. Okay, so this is the analogy. Any questions in this?
Prabhuji,
Yes.
Prabhuji, like whatever we desire, whatever we have desires and all, it will be in the intelligence or it will be in the mind.
In the mind.
Like desires. Okay, Prabhuji.
Yeah. So basically, see, all these things are subtle: mind, intelligence, ego, right? All the three things are subtle. So it's difficult to really get a complete grip of these things. Okay, but what we can only understand is, as per the description of Shastras, it says that mind actually is a storehouse of all the past impressions. So all the desires, everything is in the mind, and intelligence actually is the by the faculty by which we are able to take decisions, whether to allow or not, kind of thing. My mind will have all the impressions, all the desires, everything. It's a storehouse of all the past vasanas, and it will keep on, based on the vasanas, it will keep on giving you so many different options continuously. Like, it'll say, do this, do that. Why don't you have that? Why don't you have this? Like that, it'll keep on proposing so many things. So if the intelligence is not strong, it is very weak, then actually, the mind will just dictate everything, and it will take you wherever you want. So if the intelligence is strong, then there may be some possibility, that actually you can maybe have some control on the mind, and then maybe to have some control on the life. But nevertheless, because the intelligence is material, the control will only help to make more and more successful in material endeavors, not in the spiritual endeavor. Ultimately, everything depends on what is the goal, right? So if the mind's intelligence goal is to become prosperous in material life, then naturally all the rest of things will move in that direction. The intelligence is controlling the mind, but actually the intelligence is influenced by the material identity and material conceptions. So that intelligence will only help the mind and the living entity to become more and more entangled in the material life. But when the intelligence and the soul really understands that actually the real purpose of life is not material, and the original identity of the living entity is spiritual, then the living entity is having spiritual intelligence, then naturally this control, this spiritual intelligence which is superior, can control the mind in such a way that it can turn the chariot to the correct destination.
Okay, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes, Mataji.
Prabhuji, so the living entity soul, it is not the doer, no, Prabhuji. Like, and unless and until it is influenced by Paramatma, it cannot have control over the intelligence, right, Prabhuji?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Okay, Prabhuji.
Yeah. So that the shloka says that kartaham iti manyate means living entity is falsely thinking that he is a doer. But see, this is we have to understand from a right perspective. See, we cannot say that somebody, some criminal will kill somebody and say I'm not done it. So that is not the idea here. Okay. So the idea is that it's from a higher perspective that we are looking actually. So everybody thinks that I am the doer in the material world, right? That's how that is. See, when the living entity is in the concept of body, the bodily conception, thinking that I am the body, then he thinks that I am the doer. But actually, there's higher principle which is working behind these activities, which he is not aware, which actually is based on the three modes will act on the living entity based on the past actually karma, right, and his desires. So the combination of these two things will make the material energy affect or what do you call influence the living entity to do different activities. Yes, so these are little difficult topics actually, but I think whatever possible, if you at least we have the perception, then we can actually at least we can understand that. And so basically this is, the problem is very complicated actually, if you look at it, but the solution is very simple, that we have discussed many times. But people are, as I many times told, now people won't accept a simple solution. So without actually knowing all these things also, if somebody is ready to just accept the process which is given by the Supreme Lord, right, then actually if we just do the process, then all the problems will be solved. Without knowing how it is solved, the problems will be solved. Okay, but many times we don't accept simple solutions, no, because we want complex solutions. So that is how it is. Okay, any other questions? I think we can discuss further. Okay, so I would like devotees to also become more interactive. I should not be the person who is talking, because I think this topic we have discussed many times. So I would like all devotees to put their thoughts and viewpoints, or actually basically to, so that our understanding is more reinforced. Okay, so can somebody devotees tell? So in this first paragraph purport, like what are the important points? Each person maybe can tell one point. That also is good, so that we can discuss on that and ensure that we understood it. Okay, senses are different outlets of activities of lust. Lust is reserved within the body, but it is given when through the senses. I think this part is clear. Therefore, the senses are superior to the body. So so anybody has any doubt how each of these are superior to the previous? For example, how senses are superior to dull matter, how mind is superior to the senses, how intelligence superior to the mind, how soul is superior to the intelligence. So this part everybody is clear, right? Anybody has any other viewpoint about it, or any questions on that?
Prabhuji, like how senses are superior than dull matter, Prabhuji? Can you give one example or something?
The dull matter is dead, no? There is nothing actually. It cannot do anything.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
senses has some kind of perception, right? It has some power of perception
Okay, Prabhuji. Yeah.
that way.
Got
Okay, so this part is outlets are not used when superior consciousness or Krishna consciousness is Krishna conscious soul makes a connection with Supreme Personality of God. Therefore, the hierarchy of bodily function is described ultimately in Super Soul. Okay, so this part can somebody explain? So what it says, therefore the senses are okay. These outlets are not in use when there is superior consciousness or Krishna consciousness. So what does that mean?
Um,
Uh,
uh, what it means is that Prabhuji, in general, although we are saying that mind is superior to sense organs and intelligence is superior to mind, this apparatus in day-to-day practical uh, world, when there is no Krishna consciousness in the working way, then it is the other way around, because the sense organs become too much attractive, and
Hmm.
therefore they behave as if they are more stronger, and the mind becomes dull.
Yes.
It is in the complete control of the sense organs, and it's only through when the mind is subdued of and it is decluttered from the sense organs, or the sense perception rather. We cannot declutcher from but the if we take it out from the influence circle of this sense organs and put it in the right hierarchy, where intelligence is higher and mind is lower and sense organs are under the control of mind, then this is then we are in the right hierarchy. That is what and in the that is what I felt, you
Yes,
is
Mataji.
given in the first paragraph. So that is how it says that that it is more superior, or
Yes,
to the question. Yeah.
yes, very nice, Mataji.
And one more thing, Prabhuji, like
Yes.
always in being in Krishna consciousness is the
Hmm.
only way we can make our mind to be in the superior stage only. So it will not be come under mind and will not get misleaded. If the intelligence is always in the superior, in the first phase, then everything falls under the control of that intelligence, and
Yes.
so the our intelligence should be always under Krishna consciousness, in Krishna consciousness.
Yes. Yes, Mataji. Nice point. Yeah, so that's what actually. So the outlets are not in use when there is superior consciousness or Krishna consciousness. Yes. So basically, there are multiple ways. So basic the yoga process will try to control the mind by, for example, the pranayama, breathing process, and other yogic process, right? So this is actually kind of an artificial. So this is more like a symptomic treatment, actually. So you can try to control the symptoms, but the root cause actually is not really solved. The root, basically, lust is the root cause. So even though somebody may become a yogi, so that is what no, like we many times we have seen in Bhagavad Gita and previous discussion, right? So among the yoga ladder, there is a karma yoga, jnana yoga, dhyana yoga, and bhakti yoga. So the bhakti yoga is actually considered as more superior because actually it can completely address the root problem. Because ultimately we have to understand that all these things, the material, entire material creation is just not a mechanical arrangement. There is a person, an intelligent person behind it, and no, that is a person, and then he has created everything for a purpose. So if understand until the creator himself, actually gives you some way, it is difficult for the living entity by any artificial mechanism, which is disconnected from Supreme Lord to give a final solution. So any solution that actually keeps the Lord out of the picture will not be ultimately successful. Okay, so because the Lord actually has designed this material world, right? All this creation, everything he has designed for a particular purpose. We have discussed that earlier. Now, why the living entity falls down to the material world, right? And so, unless until we are able to retrace our path, how we came down, it will be difficult for us to go back also. So, other mechanisms of without understanding the Supreme Lord. So, basically, the yoga word itself means to connect, but actually, generally, people don't know where to connect. Right? They just think that okay, yoga is just a process to control. So, basically, the root cause of all the problems is misidentification of the body and not having a knowledge of what is the destination, right? So unless until we identify the real destination, we cannot actually take any action which is proper, right? So if you think that okay, bodily comfort is the ultimate purpose, I want to just become very happy, peaceful in the world, and no, I want to become successful. So then actually, naturally, our activities will be accordingly. So we have to understand what is the real purpose. If you know the real purpose, then we can work towards it. So that is the whole point actually, right? So so devotional service is very powerful. We have seen many times, right? Devotional service is capable of destroying all the different kind of sinful activity. There are different categories of karma we discussed, right? Like sanjita karma. So basically broad categories, sanjita and prarabdha. Then there is something called kudastha, bija, and then different stages of the sin, right? The sin is in different stages. Like one actually is not yet basically it is still in the store. Then other one actually, is actually in the seed form. Then some of the karma is in the form about to be fructified, and some of the karma is like falon muga, no, it's already like about to get fructified, and some of them we are already suffering. So like that, there are different stages of the sinful reactions. So it is told that the devotional service, Lord's, because it is spiritual energy, and we are in the material world. So the spiritual power or the spiritual energy of the Lord or devotional service is such that it can destroy all the karma which are in various stages, including the seed, and which is not taken any of the karma which is there, right? Sanjita, prarabdha, kodastha, bija, any of them, everything is completely destroyed actually by doing devotional service. But no other process can actually do that. Okay, so that is why devotional service is very powerful, right? And so we have seen that no devotional service, like, it starts with the chanting of the holy name. Last week I had a big discussion about it. The chanting of the holy name is the process actually, because the Lord's names are spiritual. When we invoke the supreme names, supreme Lord's holy names, actually that it is non different from the Lord. Abhinnatvam nama namino, it is told. Abhinnatvam nama namino. So there is no difference between the nama and the person who we are referring to, namino, right? Because that is why Krishna, the supreme Lord, is considered as absolute truth. Absolute means there is no difference actually between, so any of the Lord, like Lord's holy name, his paraphernalia, his pastimes, they are all actually very equally potent. So that is why the holy names of the Lord are very powerful. And when a person sincerely chants the holy name, actually, that can destroy all the sinful reactions which are there. Okay, so that is why the spiritual process is very powerful and potent, right? So when we perform spiritual activities, devotional service to Supreme Lord, then without our knowledge, all these things are taken care. Or naturally, our intelligence becomes spiritualized, and when you have a spiritual intelligence, then naturally the mind will become controlled. By that actually spiritual intelligence, and when the mind is controlled by spiritual intelligence, then our senses also becomes controlled. So that is actually somewhere down. It is given an example, because the senses cannot be destroyed actually. So the process of controlling the senses is not to destroy the senses, but just like a serpent actually, is very dangerous, right? As long as it has the fangs and the poison, right? With the fangs, actually, it can bite and kill somebody. But if you remove the poison, then actually this serpent is kind of useless. It cannot cause much harm. So similarly, the devotional service, when we become spiritualized, when we do perform devotional service, it purifies us from inside. That actually our tendency to commit sinful activity is eradicated, and the senses actually become harmless in that way, because everything is come from the root. So senses cannot act by itself, right? It's difficult actually. The senses is only an apparatus to, like, to enjoy or suffer, but actually it is controlled. We have seen it, there is a control, a superior control. So when we are changing in the heart is transformed, or the consciousness is transformed, then automatically all other things actually falls in place. So that is the understanding we should have. Okay, but I think nevertheless, from a technical perspective, this analogy may help us in the beginning stages, no? Like that we have some problems, we are not able to control our mind. If something is too much bothering, then we can probably, think about analogy and see what is happening here. Because generally, when somebody falls into a problem, their thinking capacity is crippled. They cannot think properly. So like that, it may help to some extent. Okay, so otherwise, actually, we are completely ignorant. We don't know what is happening. Mm, any questions till now?
No problem.
Okay, bodily actions mean functions of the senses, and stopping the senses means stopping the bodily action. But since the mind is active, then even though the body may be silent and at rest, the mind will act as if it during the dreaming. So that's what. So just controlling the senses is not sufficient, right? The mind actually will keep working. When you are, even the senses are like when you are sleeping, also the senses are inactive, but the mind is active. But above the mind is determination. So this we had understood a little bit. I think you through the soul directly engage in supreme. Yes, senses and automatically engage in kata. Mm, yeah, so param drishtva, this shloka is there in Bhagavad Gita. Param drishtva nivartade. Rasavarjam rasobhyasyam. What is the shloka? We'll search it. Param drishtva 2.59. Vishaya vinivar Vishaya vinivartande niraharasya dehina rasavarjam rasopyasya param drishtva nivartate. Though the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, the taste for sense object remains. But ceasing such engagements by experiencing higher taste is fixed in the consciousness. So this is the principle. Okay, so artificially controlling the senses is very difficult. So unless until the senses get something which is higher, right? All of the faculties like mind, intelligence, and senses, unless until they get something which is superior, artificially controlling them and restraining them is very difficult actually, because sooner or later, no, they will go out of control. So experience higher taste, that is what actually is important. The spiritual process is very highly potent, and actually is very, there is a lot of mellow in devotional service and devotional life, right? So but unless until, so when the living entity is in the conditioned state, when it is covered by lust, right, then actually this mellows and the taste for devotional service doesn't arise at all. It is completely dormant. So that is explained in one of the previous sloka. We have seen it also. Like there are different levels of covering of the living entity. Anybody remembers that?
Prabhuji,
Yes.
smoke,
Yes.
fire covered by smoke,
Hmm.
then mirror covered by dust, and
Yes.
embryo covered by womb.
Yes. So what are each of them? You remember? Like what they represent, or some example for each of the covering?
Yeah, Prabhu.
This
Like
is a shloka. Hmm.
a person who has developed little bit of Krishna consciousness, human being.
Hmm.
So his condition is like fire covered by the smoke, and
Yes.
and the trees which we see, which are like trees, are the example of the last one,
Hmm.
embryo covered with the womb, and
Yes.
these beasts and animals, they are the example of that mirror covered by dust. That is the covering of the consciousness.
Yes, Mataji, very nice. Yes. So this is very important point actually. So this way, so actually the fire which is there in the heart of the living entity, like I mean, this fire is like the spiritual potency of the living entity, and to the extent the living entity is conditioned, that spiritual this power light is actually, the fire is covered, right? So every living entity, the soul has this fire actually. Only thing is that it is covered to various extent, right, based on the conditioning of the living entity and based on the like karmic reactions, right? So in the living, in the human form of life, actually the covering is least, as just mentioned, like fire is covered by smoke. So smoke covered, fire covered by smoke can be easily rekindled, no, just by fanning it. For the other, like for animals and all, it is very difficult actually, because it is, the covering is more and more. So the fire is there in every living entity. Only thing is that we have to rekindle. So the process of devotional service is the process by which actually the fire can be rekindled, revived. So that actually is the, so the param drishta nivartade, the shloka is that, so by rekindling this fire, or no, by getting the taste of the higher spiritual activities, right, or the rasa or the melos in spiritual devotional service, then the material pleasures, everything, looks very highly insignificant actually. Actually, there are various acharyas have written about it. So unless until we come to that stage, it is very difficult for us to understand, right? So, but actually, people who are devotees who are advanced, Vaishnavas who are advanced in devotional life, they don't attribute any value to actually the material pleasures, because they are very tucha. What is the shloka? I don't remember actually. The many places in Bhagavatam it is mentioned actually. What is the shloka? Tucham. Something is there. Basically, so these material pleasures are very insignificant when compared to the spiritual pleasures. Actually, when a devotee is connected to Supreme Lord, and when he performs devotional service, that actually the bliss that the living entity gets is very, like it's like thousands and millions sometimes more. So when the living entity starts getting the higher taste by engaging in devotional service, then that is the only way by which actually our taste for the material activities can be controlled, or or eliminated. So automatically that happens when the devotee makes progress in devotional life. Without his knowledge, gradually all these unwanted things, anarthas, actually, they will automatically go away, and the senses will become like serpents without the fangs. So that is the process actually, how it is achieved. If the mind is engaged in the transcendental service of the Lord, there is no chance of being engaged in lower propensities. Okay, Mahan, the great. Therefore, the soul is above all, namely the sense. Okay, so this is the position is clear. And how actually the param drishta nivartade, that principle I think is very important to understand, right? Artificially restraining the senses is actually not much useful. That is what the shloka is saying, right? What is the shloka? Yeah. So I will see that. If fire is covered by smoke. Okay, I'm not able to find the shloka. Yeah. So I think we understood that point. Any questions in that till now? Okay, now this paragraph, any points are there? So in the previous paragraph, any points we did not cover? Anybody thinks anything is to be discussed? Then we'll move to the next one. If intelligence one engages one mind, Krishna consciousness become.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Yes, Mataji.
Prabhuji, the function of intelligence is only discrimination, right, Prabhuji?
Yes.
Like what is right, what is wrong.
Yes.
Okay.
Decision making.
Uh-huh.
Viveka.
Because, yeah. Because sometimes it is like very confusing to understand the voice of the mind and intelligence. Like it appears to be like sometimes similar.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So that is why just chant Hare Krishna.
Yeah.
Just do devotional activity. So that's our technique. See, I mean, basically, see, ultimately, see, the confusion will be more for if you are materially inclined. So if you are a materialistic person, you will have bigger confusion. Okay. But if your goal is spiritual, then it is very easy to decide. Whatever is coming, whether it is come from mind or intelligence, if it is favorable to Krishna consciousness, right, then actually that is a spiritual intelligence. That is easy to understand, right? I don't think any confusion will be there.
Uh, yes, Prabhuji.
So if anything that is proposed, so mind is the one who proposes things, and intelligence is the one actually who takes decision, or no, it gives the viewpoint to you, right? Whether I should do or not, that discrimination is there. Okay, ultimately the question, if any of the proposals, right, if it is favorable, if it helps you to go back to Krishna, right, or if it helps you to get out free from the cycle of birth and death, then actually that is what something which you have to accept. And anything which is unfavorable, we should no, we should not accept actually.
Yes.
Yeah. So unless until the intelligence is what you call is powerful, right, and it is proper, right, then only we can expect no right things to happen, right, the decisions to be proper. If the intelligence is bewildered or intelligence is not proper, it doesn't have a solid foundation, then naturally the decisions also will be like that. Will not be able to make right decisions. So for a materialistic person, it will be more difficult actually to decide. So that is why people are in the material plane. It is very difficult to decide things. And always there is a kind of what they call this paralysis by analysis. No, like basically, it may be the more you are intelligent, like or more you are learned, the more it will be difficult to make decisions. And a person who is very simple, no, he was not studied much, he is just a laborer. Definitely he may do wrong decisions, but for him decisions are easier actually. He will not think too much. But neither of them is really good actually. In the way. The more intelligent a person is, because he has more information, no, to take decision, so he may actually find it more and more difficult to take a decision. Okay, any questions or any points in this paragraph, devotees? I just want to ensure that all the points are covered. Yeah, so this part is important. By complete surrender to Supreme Personality of Godhead, then automatically the mind becomes stronger, and even though the senses are very strong like serpent, they will no more effective as serpents without broken fangs. But even though the soul is master of an intelligence of mind and senses also, still unless strengthened by association with Krishna consciousness, there is every chance of falling down due to the agitated mind. Okay, then the sloga evam budva param budva samstabhyatmanam atmana daya shatrum mahabahu kama rupam darashadam. What is that? Thus, knowing oneself to be transcendental to the material senses, mind and intelligence, O mighty armed Arjuna, one should study the mind by deliberate spiritual intelligence, and thus by spiritual strength conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. So, this translation, anybody has any doubt?
Prabhuji, I didn't get that knowing oneself to the transcendental to the material senses, mind and intelligence. So how to be transcendental to senses, mind and intelligence?
How are we? So basically, because we are the soul. So basically, we discussed. No, there is a the mind. So the soul, the subtle body, and the gross body. So this is the constitution of the living entity. So the soul is the real person, which is covered by subtle body, which is consisting of mind, intelligence, and ego, which is further covered by the gross body, which is consisting of the five elements. The soul actually is. So I am not. If I am ask you who are you, if you say that I am the mind, then actually then you are not intelligent. You don't have the right knowledge. If you say I am the senses, you are not intelligent. If you say I am the intelligence, you are not your body. So all this understanding is wrong because we are neither of them, right? So when so knowing transcendental to this mean that when somebody understands that I am the spirit soul, which is separate from the subtle body and gross body, right? That is what actually it means. The knowing oneself to be transcendental to material senses, mind, and intelligence means the person who is having the absolute knowledge about the soul, right? The Atma Tattva, right? Aham Brahmasmi, I am the spirit soul. So that with that knowledge, that is what is mentioned here. With that knowledge, O mighty Arjuna, one should study the mind by deliberate. So you should understand that I am not this, I am the soul actually. I am superior to all the other things, right? But somehow or other I am subdued because of my conditioning. But actually, when we realize our original position that the soul is the most superior and other things are all inferior to it, then actually, then we are in the real position of understanding. Is that okay, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay, so that is good. Yeah, so how to control the lust, right? Basically, two important points to control the lust. Yeah, understanding that I'm superior to all these things. I'm the soul is one part of the story, but ultimately, without the mercy of the Lord, right, and without the mercy of other Vaishnavas, it is difficult to come to that stage. Actually, it's very difficult. So that is so some things are in our control and some things are not in our control, right? So that is why ultimately ABCD is enough. Association, books, chanting, and diet. So when we do that, everything else automatically falls in place because other things are automatically taken care. Okay, and then purport is conclusive direct route to Krishna consciousness by knowing oneself as eternal servitor of Supreme Person God without considering impersonal voidness, ultimate end. Material existence of life, one is certainly influenced by propensities of lust and desire for dominating the source of material nature. So there are two things. See, one is the it's a tendency to enjoy and desiring for overloading, lauding. What does it mean? Is that the living entity has a tendency to become the master. That is what actually is. So that is why we come to the material world, right? So these are the two tendencies which are actually creating all the difficulties in the material world. One is a desire for enjoyment, sense gratification, and desiring for becoming the master or lording it over the material nature. It is the greatest enemy of the conditioned soul. But by the strength of Krishna consciousness, one can control the material senses, the mind, and intelligence. One may not give up work and prescribed duties off all of a sudden. But by gradually developing Krishna consciousness, one can situate it in the transcendental position without being influenced by the material sense and mind. Steady intelligence directed towards one's pure identity. This is the sum total of the chapter. In the immature stage of material existence, philosophical speculation and artificial attempts to control the senses by the so-called practice yogi professor can never help a man towards spiritual. He must be trained in Krishna consciousness for the higher intelligence. Okay. Any other points, devotees? Krishna.
No, Prabhuji.
Okay. So I think today we are quite fast. Anybody else? So I will go through the discovery.
Prabhuji,
Yes.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes, Mataji.
Prabhuji, so this lust and modes of nature and desire for lording and desire for sense gratification, all these are all these are acting on the living entity, no, Prabhuji?
Yes. Can you repeat what are the things?
हाँ, एक minute. So this lust, Prabhuji, lust,
Yes.
lust, and these modes of material nature,
Yes.
modes of material nature, lust, because we have seen that in this third chapter that lust will force them to act in a sinful way, and then modes of material nature are also there. So they all supplement each other, Prabhuji. Modes of material nature, lust, then this desire for sense gratification and desire for lording over the material nature.
Yes. So see the desire, whether it is lording it over the material nature or sense gratification. So that is the desire of the living entity, right? So that is part of
Uh-huh.
the living entity. And the lust is also
Achha.
part of the living entity. All these things are within the living entity. And the modes of
Uh-huh.
material nature are outside the living entity, right? That is how the
Achha.
material nature is controlling, affecting. So all this, see the lust and all the lust, right, of the living entity, all the desires of the living entity can be represented by the form of karma that had been discussed in the beginning. Na? So based on the
Uh-huh.
past activities of the living entity, so you can either call it the desires or you can call it the karma. So whatever the living entity is acquired, right, set of vasanas he has acquired. So to
Mhm.
fulfill that vasana, the material mode actually helps the living entity. By putting that living entity under the different modes. For example, if you want to do some activity which is passionate, actually the living entity should be under the influence of mode of passion. Right? If you want to do something good, then you will be under, so this way the material energy puts the living entity under the modes of different modes, so that the living entity's propensity to fulfill that desires or whatever vasanas he has acquired is actually satisfied.
Okay.
So these are
Then that
active.
mode will act on the living entity, no, Prabhuji?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, it's all facilitating. The material nature is designed in such a way that the living entity's desires are fulfilled in the material world. Right? That is why the
Uh-huh.
living entity comes here, and then he gets entangled by performing different activities. The living entity becomes more and more entangled in the net of Maya, right? Maya
Uh-huh.
Jal, we call no
Uh-huh.
the Jal or the Maya, the net of the Maya. The living entity get trapped actually. So it gets
Uh-huh.
more just like in a quagmire, no? Like the more you try to come out, the more you go deeper and deeper. So that way, as long as you try to fulfill the material desires, the more and more we get entangled in the material existence. So
Uh-huh.
how do we come out of the entanglement? Actually, is what actually we are discussing about the devotional service, right? So we have to cut the knots of
Uh-huh.
attachment.
Yes.
So yeah, so basically, how to do? See, technically, the jnanis will try to analyze in a intellectual perspective what are the technicalities of this. So that is why many of the Mayavadis philosophers, right? So many people who are reading Bhagavad Gita in today's world, they are actually all influenced by the Mayavada philosophy, right? Which actually is having a tinge of the jnana. Basically, they think they by their what do you call by their intellectual power capability, they think that no, they can understand things and then they can take care of themselves without actually having the Lord in the center or Lord in the picture. So that is why these attempts are failing, right? If you try to understand Bhagavad Gita from an intellectual perspective, you may try to analyze it in various ways, but actually to get out is very difficult actually by that intellectual process, because ultimately that this everything is designed by the Lord, right? And Krishna says
Mhm.
is that देवी एषा गुणमयी मम माया दुरर्थया माम एव ये प्रपद्यन्ते माया मेदाम तरन्ति. So Lord
Uh-huh.
actually created, designed the material world. It is not now by just by some odd combination everything has come into existence. It is by explicit design in the material world. The Lord is the most intelligent person, right? So naturally he has designed everything beyond, much beyond our thinking capacity. And Krishna and he Lord himself is saying that Devi Esha Gunamayi Mama Maya Durartaya. This material energy consisting of the three modes of nature is Mama Maya Durataya. This is my energy because it's Lord's energy, Lord's external energy, right? Mama Maya Durataya. It is very difficult to surmount. You cannot surmount or overcome this material energy by your own effort, by intellectually analyzing there or by doing yogi process. None of the process actually we cannot overcome the material energy because she is very powerful. Devyesha Gunamai Mama Maya Durataya. How can you overcome? Mam eva ye prabadhyande Maya medam tarantide. Only by surrendering to me, because he is the controller of the Maya. Mam eva ye prabadhyante. Prabadhyante means take shelter of the Lord. Surrendering to the Lord. Mam eva ye prabadhyante Maya medam tarantide. Then actually you can easily overcome the Maya. That we have seen, na? That shloka is no? Padam Padam Yesho Murare, right? Padam Padam, yep. That anybody remembers shloka? That very nice shloka is there. So by just taking shelter of the lotus feet of Mukunda, the entire material existence, which is unsurmountable, will just become like the hoof print of a calf. The water there is in the hoof print of a calf, you can just easily cross over, right? Otherwise, it is very unsurmountable. Is it okay, Mataji? Hare Krishna.
Ah, yes, Prabhuji. Ha, thank you, Prabhuji.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Discovery. Arrange the order of the increasing superiority. So, what is most superior in this ABCD?
Intelligence. Soul.
Okay.
Prabhuji
What
soul.
next?
So
After soul, what comes?
Intelligence, mind, and senses.
Yes. Good. What are the two greatest enemies of the conditioned soul?
Lust is the
False
greatest enemy.
Yeah. One more is there.
False ego, Prabhuji.
What is that,
False.
Prabhu?
False ego.
Um, is it mentioned in this today's discussion? I don't think today we didn't discuss about false ego, no?
Yes. Desire, Prabhuji? Is it desire? Mm.
Lust is connected to desire, I think. I think the tendency to lord it over the material nature, I think. What is it?
Yes, Prabhuji. Desire for overlording and sense gratification.
Hmm. Yes. Yeah. So the tendency to lord it over, no, becoming the master, right? That actually is tendency is causing the problem. Okay. Good. Then, who, how can we avoid the mind and senses being engaged in lower propensity?
By Krishna consciousness.
Yeah.
By
Everything
engaging
for
higher
everything.
principles.
Yes. Param drishtva nivartade. You have to remember that shloka. Param drishtva nivartade.
Okay.
What does it mean? Mataji
Means
told.
giving the higher. Yeah.
Yes. By tasting the higher thing, will our taste for lower things will naturally go away. Correct, no?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Yeah. Yes. Then we'll understand. So otherwise, we are actually entangled in that.
Mm.
Okay. Then, is it a good idea to stop all activities to control the senses? What is the better alternative?
Not a good idea. It's a neophyte idea, as
Hmm.
given in this text. And the only uh, solution is surrendering, to the higher and developing a taste towards, the higher truth, and engaging the mind uh, in the thought and action of the higher good. That
Yes.
is how we can come out.
Very
And
nice.
by doing devotional service and bhakti yoga is the better alternative.
Yes. Yes. Same. Yeah. So same thing we express in two different ways. Yes. Devotional
Yes.
service. Understanding how does Krishna conscious make the soul strong enough to avoid the influence of material nature? Explain with an example. So this is not this is out of syllabus question. You have to think and tell. It will be there, but no, it will not be exactly there. So what is our understanding about it? So now let's say we understood all these topics. How does Krishna conscious make the soul strong enough to avoid the influence of material nature? Explain with an example. Anybody wants to try that?
Prabhuji, again, just like what we discussed now,
Hmm.
material, most of the time, a mind is engaged, in sense gratification, or, behind the trying to address the lust and, going after it, really, desires. But once we try to put it, in the service of, devotion, or in the higher principles, it gets less and less engaged in the sense objects, and that is why um, sinful actions, can be
Yes.
prohibited.
Hmm.
Um, for example, one might be doing various different activities, on a day-to-day basis, where they are trying to satisfy, their desires, which may end up, in putting us at a lower level, spiritually as well. And or it may not even help, if not lower, it may never help us to evolve ourselves, in the higher
Hmm.
uh, uh, in the higher realms or higher level, really.
Yeah.
So, by chanting and by devotional service, slowly, that, because it's a transcendental activity, not only it's a double gain. One is that the double gain is that one point is that the mind is not going to engage in sense gratification, and thereby the risk of falling down is prevented. And the second and the most important gain is, because it is transcendental activity, it will also be nutritious and nourishing, to the soul, and thereby increasing the strength of the intelligence, which
Hmm.
is got a higher control over the mind and the mind on the senses, and thereby the system becomes more tighter.
Hmm.
That's what
Yes, Mataji. Thanks for sharing the thoughts. Other devotees, anybody want to add? So I think the understanding of this topic is very important. No? So whatever we understood, I mean, we should try to apply. So understand until we just theoretically learn and don't do any application, then I mean it's not really useful, right? So understanding is important. What is how to apply is also important. Yes. So other Matajis like Preeti Mataji, what you say? Niveda Mataji.
Yeah, Prabhuji, whatever Aruna Mataji is told, like
Mm,
the Krishna consciousness is the only uh, uh, place where they will tell only about the soul. Like we are not the body and we are the soul. In all other process, yoga process and everything, they are all connected. Material, they will all always explain about material things, and we always be thinking about bodily concepts. So in Krishna consciousness, it will be where only we can make our soul so strong that thinking we are not the body, we are the soul, and so that we can cultivate the habit to make ourselves understand not the body and the soul, so that we can get connected to the super soul.
mm,
And the example is like changing of the dress, like making our garments, thinking that is the we are the garment, the dress is not a real thing. That is one example. And helping a drone person, like helping him with the dress,
mm.
only pulling the dress will not be helpful.
Yeah.
So with this, so making the soul strong is only via Krishna consciousness. And always with chanting we'll realize that we are not the body, we are the soul. And reading the Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam and hearing the lectures, we are making our soul strong enough,
Mm.
and so that we can avoid the material influence.
Yes. Yep. So basically the principle I've already explained. No? So basically, question is how does Krishna consciousness make the soul strong? That is kind of how. So basically, how means basically we are depending on the Lord. That is the whole point. Ma- Devi Esha Gudamayi Mama Maya Durartaya Mam Eva Ye Prapadyante Maya Meda. So basically, the living entity under in the condition stage is highly incompetent or no highly is very weak actually to overcome the Maya. No, basically the living entity is completely under the grip of Maya and is very helpless in the condition state. So only way to get out actually is by surrendering to the Lord because he is the master of Maya. So how does Krishna consciousness make the soul strong? Because the Lord is superior to all these things. He is source of everything. When the living entity takes shelter of the Lord, then actually the Lord helps the living entity. Uh, that is a process by which it is working. How devotional service is helping the living entity to become strong is because actually we are depending on the spiritual energy of the Lord. And material energy is like not natural material energy, right? So the three energies of the Lord are like Andaranga Shakti, Bahiranga Shakti, and Tadasa Shakti. Andaranga Shakti is spiritual potency, Bahiranga Shakti is the material energy, and Tadasa Shakti is living entity, right? The soul. So, by taking shelter of the superior energy of the Lord, actually the living entity can overcome the material energy, which is inferior. Actually, the living entity is superior to the material nature also, because the living entity is a tadastha shakti, is temporarily is tadastha. When he is under the conditioned state, the living entity becomes tadastha, which means that it becomes it's controlled by the material energy. But in reality, the pure soul is spiritual and it is superior to the material energy. Nevertheless, because of the conditioning, it becomes inferior temporarily. But as soon as the living entity takes shelter of the superior energy, the spiritual energy of the Lord, then it can actually it can overcome the influence of Maya. Right? That way, it becomes powerful and to overcome it.
Yeah.
And how can we can example how does Krishna consciousness makes see basically example I'm not exactly sure what they're expecting here, but what one thing we can see is that to avoid influence. So how can we avoid influence? So basically, material nature's influence. How can we avoid? So one thing is that the living entity has the propensities, right? We have various desires. So living entity cannot become desireless. Okay. The only thing what we can do is that what is required is transformation of lust to love. Right? It is we cannot completely eliminate everything like lust and love both we cannot give up because living entity has a natural tendency to love. right? So only thing is the transformation is required. Now we are actually trying to satisfy our own senses, but actually when we should, instead of that, we should try to satisfy the sense of the Supreme Lord, just like the root of the tree watering, right? That example is there. So actually in devotional service, it is not that, no, we, so basically the Mayavadi philosophers, Mayavadi sannyasis, who are actually following of the Advaita Vada, the Shankarites, etc. They try to do dry renunciation, and then it is very difficult to make progress in that. In Bhagavatam, it is said, no, what is that shloka? Klesho adigrasto avyakta avyakta asakta chedasa. What is the shloka? Klesho adigrasto. What is the shloka? Yeah, avyakta asakta chedasa. So Krishna is saying that, people are attached to the impersonal concept. Actually, it is very difficult. So Mayavada philosophers, what they try to do, they say neti, neti, neti. Like not this, not this, not this. So by the indirect process, they try to find out, oh, this is not, this is not, this is not. That is one thing. And second thing is that they artificially try to give up everything, and they don't, unless until we develop attachment to something superior. Artificially, we cannot give up everything. We cannot suppress everything. That actually will not last long. So we have to develop the connection to Supreme Lord. That is a Param Drishta. Next sloka, next question. What do you understand by Param Drishta? So we have to disconnect from this material conception and material sense gratification, and we have to connect to the superior consciousness. And no, so basically, whatever activities in spiritual life is also full of bliss. No, devotee's life. It is not that devotee's life is full of dryness. Devotee has everything actually, because we actually like we worship the Lord, we sing for the Lord, we dance for the Lord, we prepare very nice food stuff for the Lord, we prepare prasadam, and after offering to the Lord, actually we take the prasadam, right? And we can see that devotees are chanting the holy names of the Lord. They are very happy. No, that is not an artificial happiness. They have a natural happiness because of the revival of the original consciousness. So a devotee doesn't lose anything, right? He can do everything actually. What actually we are normal, a normal person is doing. No, he is doing everything, and it doesn't, you never feel that he's bereft of something. So if somebody feels like that, then there is some problem in the understanding. If somebody is feeling like that, okay, but somebody who's actually understanding the principles really, that is called yukta vairagya, right? It is not to reject everything, but actually use everything in the service of the Lord. Okay, we should not be duplicitous. No, in that process we should not try to become try to enjoy sense gratification, because unless until we make progress in devotional life, in the initial stages, in the neophyte stages, we, our mind will still try to keep cheating us, trying to say, okay, this is also devotional service, do this is also devotional service, like that it may tell you. But I know when we become more and more advanced, then we can understand that, okay, that, so to some extent there is an what you call sense gratification intention in that. But that in the beginning stage is okay, but when we make more and more progress, then naturally that thing will come. No, that is called, that artificial renunciation is called Falgu Vairagya, right? And then the real renunciation is Yukta Vairagya. Like we can use everything in the service of Lord. I know we can continue to give as a grahastha. We can do everything actually, and then at the same time keep Lord at the center. Our consciousness is gradually getting transformed, but no, we are not actually completely bereft of everything. Okay, so that is the point. Any questions? Yeah, Paramdrishta Nivartade is clear, right? So basically, I would already explained about it. No, when we get the higher taste, then naturally the lower interest in the lower taste will go away. No, that, so that is the less, the mellows in the devotional service, the rasas actually there are there, right? So that is why, there's a book actually which is written by Rupa Goswami, Bhakti Rasa Amrita Sindhu. So Bhakti Rasa Amrita Sindhu. So Bhakti Rasa is like a nectar. Bhakti Rasa Amrita Sindhu. No, it's an ocean of nectar, the devotional service. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also says, no, Anandam Buddhi Vardhanam, Ambudhi, like ocean again, Anandam Buddhi. So it's like an ocean of bliss. So devotional service, when we cross in the neophyte stage, we may not get the full, we may get only some glimpse here and there. But actually somebody, crosses, and becomes advanced in devotional service, they are continuously, what do you call, they are always tasting the bliss of devotional love, right? So such a people, even if you give everything, the entire world, they will not be ready to give up, right? So that actually right now it is little bit kind of a, far away for us, but no, but as soon as the living entity starts devotional service, we start getting some glimpse, something, small things here and there, we can get a jalak, but we may not get everything. So but I think we should have the faith in the acharyas, in the senior Vaishnavas, and the Supreme Lord, and keep persisting in the devotional path. Then actually, we can see that many other devotees, we can see from other devotees. That is why it is very important to have association, advanced devotees association we should have. We can see that pure devotees, how they are relishing these things, right? So then actually our faith will increase more and more. So association is something which is most important in progress in spiritual life. How can we be more focused in engaging our senses in devotional service? How do you plan to do that? Yeah, maybe this everybody can say one line, 2 lines, 3 lines. Okay. How can we be more focused in engaging our senses in devotional service? How do you plan to do that? Maybe you can say how do you plan to do also. You can say for the first part you are not able to think.
Nama Sankirtana, Prabhuji.
Okay.
And
Yes.
daily chanting will improve slowly or give the power to.
Yes, Nadaji. Nityam Bhagavata Seva is also there. You can read Srimad Bhagavatam daily.
Yes,
You started reading, Mataji?
yes, Prabhuji. I've been reading.
Okay, very
Yeah,
nice.
yeah. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Raji Mataji told that by following the 9 Navavidha Bhakti, Shravanam Kirtanam, right? Shravanam Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam. So these are the, so actually recently somewhere I read no, in Chaitanya Charitamrita, there is a Navavidha Bhakti, right? Shravanam Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam. This is a 9 process. So earlier also we saw that no, even if one of them if you do Hare Krishna, whatever you were like that I cannot put in words. Okay. So it is also told that any of these 9 processes is also very potent. Even if you follow one sincerely, that also can give you perfection. So I read that in Chaitanya Charitamrita that chanting of the holy name, encompasses everything actually. So if you do chanting of the holy names very sincerely, then all the 9 processes, indirectly you get a benefit of doing all the 9 other processes. So that chanting of the holy name is very powerful, the most powerful actually. So yes, so basically the ABCD we have to follow, right? How can we be more focused on engaging devotional? It's very simple. ABCD. If you know ABCD, then you know everything. Association, keep reading the books, chanting of the holy names, and eat only Krishna prasadam as much as possible. That actually is the very simple process, and then it can give you all perfection by doing that. Anybody else? Any other points? Or any questions?